Sometimes you just find errors at the worst possible times, like when you're halfway into a project and cannot for the life of you figure out where the problems are. And then suddenly it clicks. It's right there, right where you've been looking this entire time, and now all you need to do is tear everything down to get to it. Right now is one of those times, and right now I need to talk about it and why it's making Urban Arcana so delayed. It's a mess that has plagued the system from its inception that I need to address now, or the game will never be playable. And that's what this video is about, making sure that my problems are addressed and that you know about it, so that you understand why I'm not only so upset about what's happening, but also my frustrations at not getting out the system when I wanted to. First off, hi, I'm Tiny Dice Thief. Let's just stick with dice for now. I've been working on this little project of mine for a while, a modern fantasy TTRPG about secretive bands of wizards and knights fighting against or for a still secretive society of courts in control of the world from the shadows. If you've been watching my channel at all, you might know this as Urban Arcana. I've been developing the system for several years now, making small improvements over time as I started to get an idea of what I wanted out of systems like D&D, Lancer, the Hollow Knight TTRPG, Pokemon Tabletop United, and more. I have been mostly developing the system solo with some level of input from friends, family, and a few others that have helped playtest the material. And while the system has been clunky and awkward for a long time, I chalked it up to just being new to game development and not having done a lot of polishing on the game. But as more and more flaws started to appear, I had to create an entire rework in order to fix the game. You can see that in this video here. But after I finished, something was still wrong. The game wasn't working correctly, and like I said before, I spent hours poring over what I had made. All my notes, my pieces, my random scribbles. Just couldn't find it. And then one playtest, the reason hit me in more ways than one. I was asked a simple question. What do all these features actually do with the dice I roll? And I could not answer that question. In truth, at the time, they basically did nothing. I could not find a single part of my system that allowed me to use the features I had implemented for players in any meaningful way. Because of this, I kind of found that the system was frustrating to play and could not make any significant progress on it because of this. It left me rather disappointed. What was I doing? I had already done a massive rework in order to fix the game, and then I found out I had solved none of the real issues with the system. It was a devastating feeling. Regardless though, I had a problem in front of me and a lack of ways to solve it. And that's what this video is here for, in order to properly document what has happened over the last while with the development and what I've been set up to as I finish the changes being made to the system. Now granted, this isn't everything, I still have quite a bit of work to do, but as it stands, the groundwork for these new versions of the system are in place and ready for testing, so I'll be going through that today. Where do we begin? Well, first, let's take a look at the system as it was, and then break it down piece by piece to see where it has moved on to. We'll go through the main portions of the system and talk about where the new version took inspiration from and how the existing features changed to match the new rules. We'll also be looking at the current appearance of the document I've been writing for the system, incomplete as it is, to show the current disaster that is my note-taking and old design philosophy. But when all that is done, I'll go through the main portions of what I'll be shooting for in the next stage of development. With that out of the way, let's start looking at what went wrong with the system and how it affected development. Looking at everything I made, it all starts with the dice system. This one decision to use D100 dice for the Urban Arcana was a major problem when it came to the design of the game, but back then I couldn't quite see it. The problem starts with how there was a lack of what features did to modify the dice. There were no modifiers, no detriments, and there was a disconnect between what the features wanted to do and what the dice wanted to do. It leads to a constant fight between mechanics to determine what to do with them. And so here we are again, trying to find a solution to the problem I created myself. But I have come up with a potential solution, provided it doesn't fall apart on me. This should lead to a fix for our system and take the game in a new direction. So far, it has been a solid change to the system, and I plan on keeping it that way. It's been a huge, just difference overall, deciding to take everything and tearing it apart to rebuild from the ground up. It's really let me see where I messed up the system. I found a lot of areas that were completely unusable, and some that just weren't finished. So let's go through all that now, take apart all the pieces of the puzzle, and explain them one by one, where I found flaws and what exactly is the problem. When it comes to the game of Urban Arcana, there's quite a bit to talk about in this rework. But to start with, we need to explain the dice system a little bit. Like I stated in previous videos and above, Urban Arcana is a D100 system, with checks and saves aiming to get above a target threshold in order to succeed. It was simple, rather primitive, and did not work for Urban Arcana. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just meant that I had to find a system that works better for Urban, and I have to utilize it. Breaking down the system as we have now, there's a lot of difference between the old way we did things and the new way we're doing things. For starters, you're not rolling a single die or set of dice. Now, checks and saves are rolled by generating a pool of dice based on the player's stats and skill ranks. That sounds easy so far, right? Well, we haven't hit the crunchy parts. I'll run through the way everything works, and then after that, we'll provide an example of how to round this all out. Let's start from the very beginning. The Monarch calls for a check or a save. In this case, for quick reference, the Monarch is the name given to the GM or DM of the session and system. I wanted something a little bit different than GM or DM for the narrator, and as such, I chose Monarch. It fits with the theme, and also it's just kind of cool. Anyways, the player then generates a pool of D4s based on their stat or skill rank, whichever is higher, using the lower number to upgrade a set number of those dice to D6s. Then other skills, features, and spells come into play, allowing for more dice to be rolled or upgraded. This pool is then rolled in two parts. First, the highest value die, but in this case you'd pick one if multiple are the same value. This dice is rolled separate. This is called the skill die. It determines if a variety of skill triggers occur during the check. Then the remainder of the dice are rolled and compared to the target number. This amount determines success or failure. During this time, roll triggers are checked and any applicable will be added. Finally, any triggers that happen on a success, such as specific spells, are checked and activated if they have the right conditions to do so. And that's how a check is made. Saving throws and attack rolls are made in a similar fashion, just trading out target numbers for target evasions in the case of attack rolls, and some spells. Now that we have determined how to make a check, we can see it in practice. Let's do this 3 times, one for a check to climb a wall, one for an attack roll, and one for a spell being cast. First, as stated above, a check will be something that you have to do that isn't quite aggressive action or spellcasting related. There is exceptions to this rule, such as grappling or other options, which we will address in a later point. However, for this, we will be attempting to climb a wall. Let's assume a wall blocking an alleyway where you are being chased down. First things first, we need to determine, since climbing by default is a strength-based skill, we only need to worry about that stat for now. Now, our character, let's say, is an above-average person in the department of physical prowess. So let's say they have a strength of 5 and an athletic skill from 3 from both skills and proficiencies. This means we will start with 5d4, as that is the higher number. Now, with our base pool generated, we upgrade 3 of those dice to d6s, representing our athletics skill. Now, this will mean that the pool becomes 1d6, which is our skill dice, along with 2d6 and 2d4, which is our roll. Now our character will be a street artist. As such, they want to get away from people mad about their art quite a bit. So as such, they have, let's say, the athlete and expert climber skills, representing learning to scramble around the city and the physical ability they have from all that running. Now with those 2 skills, we get to pick a benefit in some cases and gain a benefit in others. For athlete, we get to choose to either upgrade 1 die in our pool or add a copy of our lowest value die to the pool. Let's upgrade a d4 to a d6 in order to just increase the odds of getting past the check. Now, expert climber will upgrade a die when we attempt to climb a difficult surface. So now, because it's not specified, we have to choose a die that we're upgrading. In this case, let's upgrade a d6 to a d8. Now that puts us at a pool of 1d8 skill, 3d6, and 1d4. Now finally we have stamina points and spells we can add to the pool. With stamina, we are allowed to spend up to our base value pool, in this case 5, increasing the amount of dice we roll by 1 for every 2 stamina spent, or upgrading a die to its next tier for 3 stamina. In this case, let's do both, as our character is desperate in putting their all into this. Now the pool is getting a little bit big, but let's spend that stamina to upgrade the skill die again. So first, we add a dice, and then we upgrade our skill dice to a d10. This pool has now reached 1d10 skill, 3d6, and 2d4. Now we get a spell buff from our wizard friend, who grants us an upgrade to our lowest value die for all strength-based rolls for a little while. This upgrade makes one of our remaining d4s a d6, putting the final pool at 1d10 skill, 4d6, and 1d4. Now we can roll the dice and determine what the results are for the check. In this case, we've rolled a 26, but the actual value does not count the skill dice, so that would be a 17. Now, Expert Climber does have a benefit here. It has a skill trigger of 6. If you roll a 6 or higher on the skill die, which this is granted to change depending on how the skill is balanced, you can actually grant an additional upgrade to your next ally's attempt to climb, as you show them a good route. In this case, we grant our big burly or very nimble friend, whoever happens to make it first, the chance to have a better result on their roll as they upgrade one of their dice. That remaining 17, however, is compared against the target number. Let's say, for example, it is a 14. This would mean that we have successfully passed the check and we can climb over the wall. We escape and no longer have to worry about getting this chase, as we have trapped our pursuers on the other side of the wall. Now that that's the case, let's look at an attack roll and determine how that would look when it comes to dice rolls. Alright, so for an attack roll, there are a few changes that need to be made to how checks are rolled. In this case, we'll actually need to spend a bit of stamina to make an attack. This means our leftover pool of stamina is going to be lower, and therefore we can't use all of it to improve our odds of succeeding. Let's start with determining what is happening. After fleeing over the wall in the alleyway, the party gets cornered by their foes in an abandoned building and a fight breaks out. Our street artist has a bat and attempts to hit someone in the face. First, we determine the base pool we are using for this check, or attack roll in this case, starting with our strength once again, as we are going to have a base pool of 5d4, because it is the higher number compared to our brawl skill, which is not very good, only a 1. Not a great start, but we can improve things by using our skills and features. Our street artist happens to have a skill called Let's Jump 'em, which gives you a whopping 2 upgrades to your lowest value dice when attacking someone who hasn't taken a turn in combat yet. Now that brings our total up to a total of 1d6 skill, 2d6, and 2d4. Now, we'll only be able to spend 2 to add another dice to the pool, as our stamina is rather low. But our wizard's buff spell from earlier and a handy little gadget our other friend has made enhance our strength when attacking. So first, we'll upgrade a d6 to a d8 to enhance our skill dice, and then upgrade a d4 to a d6, leaving us at a pool of 1d8 skill, 3d6, and 2d4. Now, let's give it a shot and see if the bat meets the face. In this case, we only rolled a 7, which is below the target's theoretical evasion, so the bat does not meet the face. However, we did roll high enough that our skill die does trigger Let's Jump 'em. In this case, Let's Jump 'em gives us the opportunity to re-roll all of our 1s. So, counting this as 4, we end up getting +5, meaning our total becomes 4 plus 6 plus 2, which is 12, which still does not meet evasion of this foe. Let's say it's around 13, but the attack misses regardless, and now we have to worry about them attacking back. Now, Let's Jump 'em is rather powerful. However, Let's Jump 'em only works on foes that haven't taken a turn, meaning this does not trigger again. So our artist is in a very, very bad position. but let's see now how our wizard friend will help by casting a spell. Alright, so now we are on the final check of this video, a spell or system check. These are probably the most complicated to explain, but let's try to run over them quickly first. A spell or system is a piece of advanced technology or magic power that a player or enemy entity may utilize to accomplish things beyond the norm. Anything from a fireball to an EMP pulse could be considered a system or spell depending on its origin. In this case, let's just go with a simple spell, Flame Lance, and use it during this combat against the enemies that have pursued the fleeing players into this abandoned building. After seeing the swing of the artist's bat miss the foe, the wizard attempts to support their friend by conjuring a bolt of fire and shooting it at them. However, they don't just call a simple ball of sparks and hurl it, they go with something a little more powerful, a simple yet effective spell called Flame Lance. To determine the spell's attack roll, first the character must spend a certain amount of focus points in order to cast the spell. Flame Lance costs 5 focus points to cast, as well as 2 actions, more on that in later, or potentially another video. Now that the focus points are spent, the spell is cast. Let's keep things simple. The wizard has 5 mind and an arcane skill of 4, making their base pool starting at 5 d4s, and then upgrading 4 of those d4s to d6s. The pool is 1d6 skill and 3d6 plus 1d4. Not a bad start. Now we need to add on all features. Our wizard has a feature called the Flameborn, which besides reducing fire damage they take, gives them an upgrade to 1 die when casting or utilizing a fire-based spell or system. Let's upgrade that skill die. Now the wizard will also have picked up the feature Burn It All Down, which gives fire damage that they deal an additional lowest value die. So now the pool is 1d8 skill and 3d6 plus 2d4. Finally, the gadget tier has given the wizard an item. This item boosts their spell rolls, upgrading 2 dice. The wizard decides to go all in on a risky skill trigger and upgrades the skill die twice, going from a d8 all the way to a d12, making the final pool 1d12 skill and 3d6 plus 2d4, risking it all to ensure that their skill trigger activates. In this case, since we determined earlier that the enemy has an evasion of 13, we will have to beat a 13 in order to make the spell succeed. However, the skill dice has to roll high enough in order to trigger their skill check. In this case, we got a 13, exactly what we need to hit the enemy. The spell would deal damage, the enemy would make an endurance save because Flame Lance has lingering damage on their next turn. However, we rolled a 10 on the skill dice. Burn It All Down has a skill trigger. When they succeed on this skill check, the dice, in this case being 10 plus, which is exactly what we rolled, gives the player additional damage to their attack, meaning this damage increases for the entire spell, not just the initial damage. The damage from the lingering effect will also be affected, giving however much d6, d8. I haven't fully determined the amount that this gives yet. It just a number. It just says all it says here is gives a number of extra damage. I'm not doing flat bonuses. So in this case, the wizard conjures this bolt of flame, fires it at their foe, and the enemy takes the hit, takes some damage. They must make a saving throw in order to prevent themselves from burning on their next turn. And now that is a spell cast. We have successfully done everything we need to determine all 3 types of skill checks. With that out of the way, let's kind of just go into a few things that will be covered in the rest of the upcoming videos. Alright, so now that we made all 3 checks, I hope that this at least demonstrates how the new dice system actually affects the game and what sort of things it does for the system as a whole. I personally am much happier with this dice system compared to the old one, even if it's a bit more complicated than the original. I find it more fun and engaging to just use in general without having, not everything written out on the document yet. I'm steadily making progress on adding things as they become relevant and are needed, but we aren't quite done with this video yet. Seeing as I have not even touched some of the other pieces of the game and changes I've made, let's just quickly run through some of the other stuff and go over that real quick. First, rebuilding the action system, which is a relatively simple change. I just changed some of the actions to basically include new ones and reworked some of the old ones. Most of these changes and reworks were clarifications or rewording of the initial way I put everything on the page in order to make them, one, more clear, and actually define certain actions that were left a little vague. I won't be making a full video on the topic because it's not a massive change and doesn't require a full-length explanation, so there's no need to do so. There's be a spell overhaul. While it's a bit more extensive than the action rework, I'm not rebuilding the spellcasting system from the ground up. This overhaul is designed to basically be a balance patch for spells, simplifying their creation and design while keeping true to the work I've already done. I'll be pushing for a full video on spells and systems in the future, so that's all I'm going to say for now because nothing's complete yet. Path modification and expansion. Now that we have a new dice system in place, we need to modify the way classes interact with the system. This won't be a major change right away, as most of the class and path framework is already done and in place and just needs to be modified to fit the new system. What really matters, and will be its own video, is expanding all of those paths into proper skill trees, giving them more diverse options, and setting up their progression as a whole. I've been taking some inspiration from a couple different systems, but I won't spoil anything right now. This does mean at some point a path overhaul will be needed and will be actually done for a video in order to, get everything done, but that's for a later video. Following this will be a system overhaul similar to spells, but for the systems aspect of the game. This one's a little more in depth as I need to really change how the systems work, but they will basically be streamlined and more in line with how spells work to make things simple and to make them usable. I will be summoning it from the fog. You cannot stop me. I will be bringing it in. Next is narrative play versus tactical play rules. This one's on the back burner at the moment because with the more pressing parts of the system needing work, I'm doing those first, but it being worked on to try and include more social interaction rules, tables, quick NPC generators, stuff like that. Status effects are getting full reworks. They will be a proper video on the topic and how I designed any sort of status effect for this game. Deathmark perks, specifically that later half of the Deathmark system, because the actual way I've built the system is fine. I don't need to change that. What I do need to change is the perks that you get. While it's not ready yet, it's being worked on. Crafting, spell creation, system creation, and weapon art creation, basically just making content for the game, like homebrew stuff like that. I want to be able to have rules in place for designing your own things. The default ones that I will be putting into the document will be a selection of, I'm hoping to be a decent quality of set of systems and spells and weapon arts that you can use as inspiration or ways to make your own. Species and more character options are going to be added. Currently everyone's human, but I want the ability to be able to play as more stuff. So expect rules and a video on that sometime in the future, but not guaranteed. Augments, they're an iffy one. Augments were a leftover system that basically just let you modify your character in specific ways, but they may be removed based on what happens with the game in the future. However, they were never completed. The system itself was never fully finished, so I don't plan on doing anything right away because it's another back burner item. But if I do finish it, it will be allowing for the use of magical and technological prosthetics, body modification for like enhanced muscles, stuff like that. Enchantments for both players and non-player entities. We're going to be eating more cheeseburgers because I'm hungry. And fixing weapon scaling. They have scaling. It just sucks right now. And it's not in a spot that I think is a good way to be used. I'm planning on making basically weapon categories and weights, and that allow for multiple scaling options on various kinds of weapons, including weapons that are hybrid damage types, to make everything feel a little bit more cohesive. But that pretty much covers everything I'll be doing with the system, at least for the foreseeable future. I do plan on doing my best to keep on top of devlogs like this and doing things to make things a little more understandable. But for now, I think that's about everything. I don't have anything written down, at least that's further. So I'm gonna be wrapping up this video. I hope that the new dice system at least makes sense and came across in a good manner. So I will see you around. I will be back with my next video and some streams. So yeah, watch out for those.